Some of these ancient stories that we hear, especially when we're in the very early moments of salvation history, today Leviticus, we don't hear from it too much, but you see a lot of stories of sickness, and obviously the gospel today of the healing of the leper. And we often wonder, these things that seem so ancient, these chronicles of moments of what to do, almost reads as if we're just sitting down reading a cookbook or an encyclopedia, which can be fun if you're really looking for those type of things. But we see these stories today of the healing of the leper, and then in Leviticus talking about a lot of skin diseases. Typically, when we hear the word leprosy, we automatically, for ourselves as 21st century people, thinking of the Hansen disease, which is a very defined disease. But not everybody in that era of time from which we're reading, that was not a broad term, leprosy. It was anyone who had any skin disease, so they didn't know how to, categorize them, and line them up. And therefore, in the beginning stages of any person's sickness, there was a sense of, well, let's just, put them and quarantine them, as we all certainly understand what that means now. Leprosy, as we know it, wasn't even cured until about 80 years ago, around late 1940s and 1950s. I had the privilege about 4 years ago to go to Malachi in Hawaii, and where one of the last few leper colonies is still there. Hence the Saint Damien of Malachi and Saint Mary Ann Copeland, two saints that came from that particular place and time in history of caring for the lepers. And there are still some there, although they no longer have leprosy, they've been cured. But there is, those who got there as children or just elderly people and chose not to leave as the only home they knew. So it's still very real to many people. And when we see this story today in Leviticus, as they talk about, as they're walking from, Egypt, into the promised land, the whole story of the Exodus, and they begin to name some of those skin diseases. If someone has on his skin a scab, a pustule, a blotch, which appears to be the sore of leprosy, maybe in those early days, the camp stopped, and they did, but up till even the 20th century, you just take that person outside the camp, not as so much as an outcast, but as we all know what quarantining means, distancing. And then for 3 chapters, we only heard 3 verses today, but for 3 chapters, they talk about the encampments and what you do with these diseases. And as you see the bigger picture, you recognize, what a kindness and thoughtfulness went into protecting the whole community as they're traveling from Egypt to the promised land. That though you're isolating maybe this one, you're doing it on behalf of all, but not forgetting the one at the same time. And you read these documents and how they cared for them, and then where you really see the sense of, as they're caring for them, their whole hope is to celebrate the person's return. And we see a glimpse of that, in the gospel this day. Holy, as we care for them, we can't wait for you to re-enter the camp, to re-engage. And in the gospel today, once the man was cured, there was a sense, go celebrate, go see the priest, go ritualize this great moment. It's like you've been reconciled, kind of like a sacramental moment, in the gospel, that it wasn't just purification rite, it was a celebration. And the whole idea of being clean, you are now back into the worshiping community. So they celebrated those moments, whether it was 3,000 years ago at the time of the Exodus experience, well before the King David and all of those particular stories, and they're doing it up to the time of Jesus and beyond. And you wanted to make the person whole and holy. Because you can only imagine, as they're traveling this Exodus experience, the trials and tribulations they had in engaging all. There's one great story of in that moment of when they were quarantining those who were sick is Miriam. We're very familiar with Miriam, sister of Moses, and typically on the Easter Vigil, we sing the song of Miriam as they come through the Red Sea, and they're celebrating their freedom, and they're celebrating that liberty. She herself has a skin disease, and she goes off into this outer camp where all the others who were sick. But in time, she was healed, so maybe she just had, like any one of us, could get a rash, an infection, and it shows itself as a rash. Well, in those days, they didn't know, was this the beginning of leprosy? But the kindness that you really see, maybe this is why it took them 40 years to come across. The camp wouldn't move until everybody could move. Like no one is left behind. Everyone is going to go into the promised land that can get there. There was no sense of just, well, catch up. It was like, we will wait. And they did. And you see the story of them waiting for Miriam as she went through the stages of like, well, you can come back in a little bit, but still stay apart for 7 days. Very detailed, but very beautiful in terms of how they wanted to make sure all were cared for. When you see this kind of beauty in the scriptures and as part of our own tradition and recognizing, and you line that up with people that we would see so many thousands of years ago as they cared for one another in one's sicknesses. And then you look at sometimes our own history and see some very dark moments that maybe we didn't read the scriptures well or listen to our own traditions. I think, well, why? We should be caring for people like this as they did, as in those early moments of salvation history. Some